The wind carried dust and sorrow that day. It was one of those afternoons when the sun sat low and angry over the dry Texas land, turning everything gold but lifeless. Rancher Luke Callahan was used to silence. After losing his wife 5 years ago, silence had become his only companion. The cattle didn't talk, and the land didn't complain. They just existed, like him. He was riding back from the far ridge when his horse stopped abruptly, ears twitching. Luke followed its gaze. A small figure stood by the riverbed, motionless. He narrowed his eyes. It was a little girl, no older than 7 or 8. Her dress was torn, her feet bare and cut. But what froze Luke's heart wasn't her condition. It was what lay beside her. A woman's body, cold, still. The child was guarding her, hands clenched into fists, chin lifted like a soldier on duty. Flies buzzed around the lifeless form, but she kept swatting them away with a stick, whispering something Luke couldn't hear. He dismounted slowly. "Hey there. You okay, sweetheart?" he asked softly, his voice breaking the wind. The girl turned sharply. Her eyes, big, brown, and full of terror, darted toward him. She took a step back, clutching a small locket around her neck. "Stay away," she screamed. "She's sleeping." Luke's chest tightened. He had seen death before. War, ranch accidents, hunger, but the sight of a child refusing to let go of her mother's body, that was something no man could ever be ready for. He crouched, removing his hat. "I'm not here to hurt you, darling. I promise." The girl's lips trembled. Her small hands were shaking. "She said she'd wake up soon," she whispered. "She's just tired. Mama's always tired." Luke swallowed hard. The truth was cruel. The woman had probably been gone for days. The tracks nearby told him enough. Their wagon had broken down. There were signs of a storm and no other footprints. No food, no water. He looked at the girl again, dirt on her cheeks, cracked lips, and those eyes that had already seen too much. "Write your name?" he asked quietly. She hesitated. "Annie." "All right, Annie," Luke said, his voice as gentle as he could make it. "How long you been out here?" Annie looked at the sky as if it could tell her. "Says Mama stopped talking." Luke took a deep breath. "Annie!" He stood up, tipping his hat to the woman's body. "Your mama's with God now." Annie shook her head violently. "No, she said we'd go to town. She said she'd buy me a red ribbon for my hair." Tears burned behind Luke's eyes. He hadn't cried in years. Not since his own little girl Emily had died from fever. She'd been about the same age as Annie. He took a step closer, but Annie picked up a rock, her small frame trembling. "Don't come near." Luke froze. "Okay," he said, raising his hands. "I won't, but you can't stay out here, sweetheart. Night's coming. Coyote'll be around soon." Her lower lip quivered. "Mama said never to go with strangers." He nodded. "Slowly, smart woman. But your mama would want you safe, wouldn't she?" Silence, just the wind and the sound of the river trickling by. Then, after what felt like forever, Annie whispered, "She told me if anything ever happened, I should find someone good. Someone who helps people." Luke smiled sadly. "Well, I ain't perfect, but I reckon I tried it to be good." She studied him with suspicion. Then, quietly, she asked, "Do you have horses?" "Got plenty." "Do you have food?" "More than enough." Then she looked at her mother's body again, tears glistening. "Can we take her with us?" Luke's heart broke. He knelt down, voice trembling. "We'll give her a proper rest, Annie, I promise." Some were peaceful. The girl didn't speak again. She just watched as Luke gently lifted her mother's body and laid it across the saddle. Then, for the first time, Annie took his hand. Her fingers were ice cold. As they rode back toward the ranch, the sun dipped below the hills. The girl leaned against Luke's chest, clutching the locket that hung around her neck. He whispered, almost to himself, "You're coming with me, kid." That night, as the stars spread across the sky, Luke buried the woman beneath an old oak near the ranch house. Annie placed wildflowers on the grave, yellow ones. Her mother's favorite, she said. Luke stood behind her, hat pressed to his heart. When she finally turned, eyes swollen but calm, she asked, "Is Mama with the angels now?" He nodded. "She sure is." And for the first time in years, Luke felt something stir inside him. Something he thought he'd buried with his own daughter, hope. Morning sunlight spilled through the curtains of the old ranch house, lighting up the dust that danced in the air. Luke Callahan sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of black coffee that had long gone cold. Across the table, Annie sat with her legs dangling from a chair too tall for her, staring at a piece of toast like it was a puzzle she didn't know how to solve. She'd barely spoken since last night. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but dry now, too dry for someone her age. Luke had seen that look before. It was the look of someone who had already learned what loss meant. "You can put some honey on that," he said gently. Annie looked up, unsure. Mama said too much sugar makes you sick." Luke chuckled softly. Reckon she was right. But a little sweetness won't hurt none. He pushed the jar toward her, and she cautiously spread a thin layer on the toast. When she took a bite, her lips trembled, maybe from hunger, maybe from the memory of a mother's hand that used to serve her breakfast. Luke looked away. Something about that moment hit him hard. This house had been quiet for too long since his wife and daughter passed. He'd thought silence was his friend. But now, with this little girl sitting there, he realized silence had just been loneliness wearing a disguise. Later that day, Luke saddled 2 horses. "Do you ever ride?"
Before, Annie shook her head. "No, sir." "Then today's your lucky day," he said, lifting her up gently onto a calm chestnut mare. At first, she was stiff and afraid. But as the horse began to walk slowly across the pasture, Annie's face lit up, not with joy, but something quieter, wonder. Luke watched her closely. He remembered teaching his own daughter to ride, her laughter echoing through the fields. That same sound he thought he'd never hear again, until Annie giggled when the mare snorted softly. By sunset, they were back at the barn. Luke lifted her down and said, "You did good, Annie, real good." She smiled in a real small smile and whispered, "Thank you, Mr. Callahan." "Call me Luke," he said. "Mr. Callahan makes me sound like an old mule." That night, as the wind howled outside, Annie couldn't sleep. She crept to the window and whispered to the stars, "Mama, are you watching me?" Down the hall, Luke heard her voice and paused at her door. He didn't go in. He just stood there, his rough hand pressed against the frame, praying quietly that somehow that little girl would find peace, and maybe, just maybe, he'd find some too. Weeks passed. Life on the ranch began to change, in small, unexpected ways. Annie helped Luke feed the chickens, brush the horses, and even name the newest calf Buttercup. She talked more now, though she still went quiet whenever someone mentioned her mother. She also had a habit every evening. She'd pick wildflowers and place them under the oak tree where her mother was buried. She never missed a day, rain or shine. Luke sometimes joined her, hat pressed to his chest, standing in silence. It became their unspoken ritual, one that stitched 2 broken souls together a little more each day. One afternoon, as Luke fixed a broken fence, a stranger rode up, tall, well-dressed, wearing a city man's coat and a hat that hadn't seen a day of dust. "You Callahan?" the man asked. Luke nodded warily. "Who's asking?" The stranger tipped his hat. "Name's Richard Moore. I'm with the State Orphan Office. Word is you've taken in a girl, Annie Grace." Luke's shoulders stiffened. "That's right." "She got any kin?" "Not that I know of." The man looked around the ranch, unimpressed. "Well, Mr. Callahan, you know you can't just keep her without legal papers. We'll have to arrange for her to be moved to a proper orphanage in Austin." Annie had come out from the barn, clutching her doll, a small, ragged thing she'd made herself. Her eyes widened. "You're not taking me, are you?" Luke's voice turned hard like thunder. "She ain't going nowhere." The man sighed. "I understand your sentiment, sir, but rules are rules." "You can't?" Luke stepped forward, towering over him. "I buried her mama myself. I fed her, clothed her, given her a roof. You tell your rules they can come see the kind of care she's getting?" The man swallowed. "I'll be back with paperwork." Then he turned his horse and rode off, dust kicking up behind him. Annie ran to Luke, tears already falling. "Please don't let them take me. I'll work, I'll help. I can even clean the stalls." Luke knelt down, gripping her shoulders gently. "Ain't nobody taking you, kid. You hear me? Not while I'm still breathing." And he meant it. That night, after Annie had fallen asleep, Luke sat by the fireplace with an old photo in his hands, his wife and daughter smiling, years before the fever took them. He looked up at the small boots by the door, the doll on the chair, the quiet breathing from Annie's room. He realized something he hadn't dared admit even to himself. That little girl had brought light back into a place he thought was forever dark. Maybe it wasn't coincidence that he'd found her. Maybe it was fate. A month later, the orphanage officer came back, but this time with 2 men and a wagon. "I told you, Callahan," Richard said, stepping down. "You can't just keep her. If you want custody, you'll need to apply legally. Prove you can support her." Luke crossed his arms. "And how long does that take?" 6 months. Maybe a year. Annie hid behind Luke's leg, clutching his coat. "Please, Luke," she whispered. Luke looked down at her, then at the men. He took a deep breath. "All right. You want papers? I'll get 'em. But until then, she stays here." One of the men moved forward. "I'm afraid that's not your decision." Luke's hand went to his belt, not for a gun, but to tighten it, a warning. His eyes turned cold. You boys want to take her. You better be ready to go through me. The men exchanged glances. They'd heard stories of Luke Callahan, the rancher who once faced down bandits alone. Finally, Richard raised his hands. Fine, I'll give you a week to file the paperwork. But after that, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. For the next 7 days, Luke worked harder than ever. He rode to town, talked to lawyers, filled forms, and called in favors from old friends. But the process was slow, too slow, and on the 8th day the men returned. They tried to take Annie from the barn while Luke was out in the pasture. But Annie ran, barefoot, terrified, through the fields, shouting his name. "Luke! Luke!" He heard her cry echo across the plains and came riding fast, fury in his chest. He reached her just as one of the men grabbed her arm. "Let her go!" Luke roared, jumping off his horse. The man froze. Luke's fists clenched. "You so much as scare her again, and I'll make sure you regret it." Richard stepped forward, voice shaking. "This isn't the way—" "You're damn right it ain't," Luke growled. "This little girl's got a home now. You tell the state that." And for the first time, Richard looked at the child, really looked, and saw the way she held Luke's hand, the way she wasn't afraid anymore. He sighed. Maybe there's another way. I'll see what I can do." When they left, Annie burst into tears, hugging Luke's waist. "I thought they were gonna take me," she cried. Luke knelt and lifted her chin. "I told you, kid, you're mine now. Family don't run away from each other." Months later, the papers finally arrived, official, sealed. Luke Callahan was now Annie Grace Callahan's legal guardian. He handed her the document, smiling. "Guess it's official, partner." Annie beamed. "Does this mean I'm your daughter now?" Luke's throat tightened. He nodded slowly. Yeah, it does." She hugged him tight, her tiny arms around his neck. "Thank you for finding me, Luke." He whispered back, "No, sweetheart. Thank you for finding me." And as the sun set behind the wide Texas plains, Luke watched the little girl who had once guarded her mother's body now running, free across his fields, laughing, alive and home at last. The silence that once haunted the ranch was gone. In its place was laughter, warmth, and a second chance at life.